Hello, everyone. Welcome to week two. It was great reading through your discussion board posts and getting to know you a little bit through that means. Uh, yeah, it's almost like I felt like I got a little snapshot of your personal histories and what drew you to the counseling field. So it was great to get to know you a little bit through the discussion board posts. And yeah, I just felt a lot of excitement for engaging on this counseling journey. A lot of maybe different experiences have brought you to this point. Uh, but yeah, it just seems like you're all excited for the growth that'll occur, and being able to be of service to people in a broader way. So yeah, it was great hearing that. Overall, too, good work with your original posts and with your peer responses. I feel like that was a pretty good example of the expectations in discussion board posts. It's not just about one or two lines and that's it, or responding to a peer with good post, period. But kind of going into more of the details, getting in more depth of being thoughtful about your original post to the questions, but then being thoughtful of what your peers have brought up. So I feel like that was a good first start to the term. All right, this will be kind of the general flow. I'll often just kind of share my responses to discussion board posts or previous assignments in these videos, and then start to talk a little bit about maybe some updates and then some of the information from the chapters. So I did just want to update you that there's a quiz for this week. It will be due on, as I pull up the calendar, September 2nd. You'll have two attempts. They're open book, open syllabus. They're 60 minutes apiece. If you're watching these videos, reading through the material online, reading through the Corey text, so it'll be chapters 1 through 3 in the Corey text, then you should be very prepared. It's kind of helpful to recognize key terms when you're reading through to maybe be able to highlight those and get back to those quickly as it's open book. But yeah, just something to consider there. And the last update, I guess, or just housekeeping is so I provide module overview documents. So in the module overview and introduction for last week, I just shared a little bit about the syllabus and kind of put the overview of what we're covering for that week, the chapters that are required, the assignment of the discussion board, and then some material. Some weeks I'll just put the overview of kind of here's what we're covering, here's the chapters, and that's about it. Some weeks I'm going to then share a lot of written material there. So this week, there's really no written material beyond just kind of the overview. So just so you kind of know that kind of depends on what I choose to put in there based on what I cover in this video and what the text materials already covered. Okay. Well, I'm going to cover just a few thoughts on chapter 2 and 3 from the Corey text. I'm not going to go over every single piece of it because I'm leaning on you reading it, obviously, but some things that I wanted to highlight. In the text on page 19, Corey talks about the personal characteristics of effective counselors. And so, for example, the first bullet point is effective therapists have an identity. The next one is effective therapists respect and appreciate themselves, etc. And it goes, I think Corey highlights a lot of important points there. And it's something to be thoughtful of, like what kind of counselor do I want to be? What kind of relationship do I want to have towards myself so that I may better able to be there for clients? I feel like the video that's the person of the therapist video that's in this week's material by Dr. Harry Aponte is a really great video. It's really just a podcast, I guess, a YouTube video podcast that talks. It's interviewing Dr. Aponte, and I think that could be a good example of the personal characteristics to consider. Uh, I wanted to also talk about value and position. A big part of counseling is, that we help clients explore who they are, their beliefs, their attitudes, their values, their core motivations for the world. But we also, we're ethically obligated to not impose our values upon the clients. So basically, as Corey states, that a value imposition is directly attempting to define a client's values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And he then states that that's an unethical practice for counselors to impose those values. It's in the ACA Code of Ethics too. Really, it's not about what we want; it's about what does the client want, and how can I help them better understand themselves and move forward in a way that they value and that they care about. That kind of gets into worldviews. You know, the client will have their worldview. Their worldview, I guess that term is often just meaning like the values, beliefs, and frame of reference of an individual. So we will have our worldview as the counselor, and the clients will have their worldview. And it's almost like these two worldviews are coming together. Sometimes there'll just be connections right away. Sometimes there's going to be some unique and important differences to recognize. You know, so I think the key with values is that we are aware of our values and we avoid imposing them. Kind of a core, I guess, question when it comes to values conflicts is, can I connect and understand the client without becoming over involved, without becoming controlling, without feeling like, oh, I need to, tell the client what to do. I need to share what I know so that the client makes the right choice. It's really not about that at all in counseling work. It's just like, how can I honor them as a unique person and help them find a pathway forward that they feel good about? So in chapter 2, Corey also talks about culture, and the importance in culture is to understand who we are as cultural beings, and then understand our clients and their frame of reference, and then having some skills and interventions to know how to intervene in a culturally sensitive manner. I'm only quickly highlighting culture right now because next week we're really going to delve into culture more. But it's also something that's just going to be infused throughout the text, infused throughout this course, and really your program and your career. Because we're all cultural beings, and culture is going to influence our mental health and our inner experience and our choices. So it's something to always be very thoughtful of the cultural lens of ourselves and the client. Okay, so those are just a few quick thoughts from chapter 2. On chapter 3, we'll jump forward really quick in our text here on ethics. Ethical decision-making models become very important with ethics. In the end, the goal of ethics, there's a few different thoughts. In the text, Corey talks about mandatory ethics, those minimum standards that we need to meet in order to be, meeting professional requirements. So that's kind of like the baseline. But then there's positive ethics. It's not just doing the bare minimum. It's doing what is best for the client. Always keeping that essential, not just what's the minimum I need to do to be considered ethical, but what's best for the client. How can I keep them central in mind when I'm trying to make decisions about what's helpful for clients. So yeah, just some core principles behind ethics of what are we trying to do. That in the end, we're trying to do good. That we're trying to avoid harm of the clients. And our the ACA code of ethics kind of helps in that regard, but it doesn't give us all the answers. It doesn't say exactly here's what you should do in every single circumstance. It's usually that they're providing principles that then we need to learn to apply in a kind of apply with wisdom. Uh, let's see. Okay, so you're going to have a whole course on ethics. So that's kind of the intro that I wanted to give on, kind of piggybacking on the Corey text. I did want to go into a little bit more detail on informed consent. So on page 41, Corey talks about the right of informed consent. And basically what informed consent, I like how he words it here, so I'm just going to read it. So informed consent involves the rights of clients to be informed about their therapy and to make autonomous decisions pertaining to it. So in working with a new client, you're going to kind of have this process of going over the informed consent document and just kind of the policies and procedures and what counseling is, and helping them understand that so that they can make a good decision whether they feel like it's right for them or not. So it's basically like the first steps towards establishing that partnership with the client. And I guess a lot could be talked about with this topic, but I at least want to go over two areas. So one is confidentiality. Clients need to know that counseling is a confidential relationship. That we're not just going to hear what they say and then just kind of share it with anyone around us. That oftentimes they're sharing very personal things, and they need to know that they can trust in the relationship and know that it's safe and secure. At the same time, there are limits to confidentiality, and Corey talks about that on page 43. Overall, it's that it's usually is someone at risk of being harmed. That could be maybe something comes up about abuse of children or abuse of people with disabilities or of the elderly. We need to get other people involved to keep people safe. It could be that the client is suicidal and has a plan and means and an intent to act on that, on those thoughts. So that would be they're in imminent danger to themselves. Or it could be homicidal ideation, that they have a specific plan and a target, and to go to harm someone else. So we have to keep other people safe as well. Uh, so those are all about keeping people safe. And sometimes, the other main situation where we would need to limit, what is a limit to confidentiality is if, due to court proceedings where our records are subpoenaed or we're called to court to testify. So that becomes a really important piece of the informed consent process, helping them understand, like, yes, it's confidential and there are some limitations. So the last piece that I wanted to talk about is trying to keep these videos manageable and brief is multiple relationships. So some, and actually most ethical codes, so professional codes like the ACA Code of Ethics, they encourage you to avoid multiple relationships wherever possible. Because obviously, if you have a relationship with a client outside of just the therapeutic relationship, like maybe you're part of a community organization together, or maybe you're part of the same church group or whatever it is, if you see them in other places, it can start to kind of impact your ability to connect in counseling. So that's kind of like, these codes of ethics recognize that and say, hey, let's try to avoid that. At the same time, some writers, so not necessarily, the writers of ethical codes, but just some writers who are writing about, ethics and multiple relationships say, what, maybe multiple roles are more normal and they're kind of unavoidable. So for example, in kind of small communities, it's going to be pretty hard to avoid clients, to not see them. Like if you're maybe in a big city, you would likely never run into your clients. But oftentimes when I've done counseling in small communities, I've had to just have conversations right from the very start saying, if we see each other in the community, which we may, it's not a huge place where we're at. I like, I won't just come up to you and start saying, hey, how are you doing? Because maybe there's other people around you or family that will then lead them to say, who was that? And so it would then start to be, oh, that's my counselor. And maybe the client doesn't want, them to know. But so I often kind of bring that up with the client and say, but if you want to say hi to me, I'm happy to say hi, but I'll just let you initiate that. So that's one example of kind of how can we start to set these boundaries with multiple relationships and multiple roles, and how we might engage if we're engaging in a way other than in the counseling relationship. You'll continue to receive more training and feedback on that. And you can always bring that up, and that tends to come up in clinical work anyways. Uh, let's see. So social media, this is what I want to end with for today. So social media is impacting so many different things, and I think it just becomes important, with social media, that it can be a real tool, an asset in our counseling work to be able to promote and share information with the community and with clients. But usually it's, separating your personal social media from your professional social media. So the professional social media might just be having an organization social media page, or if you're in private practice, the name of your social or of your private practice in social media, but not kind of interconnecting that with your personal. Clients may try to like friend you or kind of connect with you on LinkedIn on your personal accounts, but that can get really kind of dicey and difficult. So that's usually, I encourage people, avoid that. Just kind of try to keep a professional presence that's not directly like your name, but maybe the organization's name. And on page 53, yeah, Corey talks about this in a little bit more depth, and he shares a few bullet points of like limiting what's shared online, and including in your informed consent document, your policies about social media. So it just gets you to think like, how can we be thoughtful about how we engage via social media, because it's becoming so pervasive and normal. But I think we really need to be, kind of have a critical eye of how we're engaging. So yeah, these are a few thoughts for this week. Obviously, the text goes into a lot more detail here, but those are some key pieces that I felt were important to highlight. But I look forward to another week, and if you have questions or need anything, I'm happy to keep talking, to meet one-on-one via Zoom. But yeah, I look forward to another week with y'all. So see you for now.